get this underway. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to VICA's 32nd Annual Business Forecast Conference and the Future of Entertainment panel. My name is Sokoloski. I'm a Vice Chair of VICA, Vice President of Integrated Communications for FilmLA, and today's moderator. So let us first thank our track sponsor for both the Future of Entertainment and our news panels, Viacom CBS. We can't applaud, but we will do so with gratitude in whatever ways we can virtually. And let's also acknowledge our panel sponsor, FilmLA. The biographies for most of today's panelists are already in the journal and online, so I'm going to make very brief introductions so that we have more time for your questions later. Today on the panel, we have Kathy Bañuelos, who is Vice President of Government Affairs for NBCUniversal. Thank you for joining us, Kathy. Ryan Northcott, Executive Vice President, Entertainment and Development for Los Angeles Football Club and Bank of California Stadium. Ryan, nice to have you with us. And Jonathan Sanford, Chief Operating Officer of Kilburn Live. Welcome, Jonathan. So, entertainment has changed so much in just the past few months. Some have adapted, while others have been allowed to reopen, and similar venues are forced to remain closed. LA is very much an industry town, so with so many people working in the entertainment industry at so many levels, it is definitely a topic on all of our minds. I'm going to give each of our panelists a couple of minutes to make an opening statement so we can get things started, and then we're going to ask a question of each of you, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. The best way to ask a question of the speakers is for you to click on the link below for Zoom, and you can type in a question that all the speakers will see and can answer. Or if you want to stay on the Pathable platform, send your question through the chat box, and a VICA staff member will make sure that that question gets over to me. So without further ado, I want to give every one of our panelists to give a short introduction. We'll do it in the same order we introduced you. So Kathy, I guess we'll start with you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you again for VICA for inviting me to participate in this panel on this extremely important topic. As Philip noted, I'm Kathy Bañuelos, Vice President of Government Affairs for NBCUniversal. And I think, you know, we've seen so much just evolution in the industry in the last 7 months alone. It's been a very trying time. And I think we've seen some really innovative, sort of inspiring changes, a lot of collaboration between stakeholders that gives me a lot of hope and optimism that we can continue to just basically harness some of these innovations, evolve together, and figure out a way to live with this virus and the pandemic. Unfortunately, as you noted, we've seen some of our sectors that have not been allowed to reopen yet, which is extremely troubling, especially on the theme park side. The future of live entertainment, you know, until there's a vaccine is sort of very much up in the air, but just given what we've seen and what we've been able to accomplish collectively, I do feel like there's a path forward. As long as we continue to share ideas, face them together, and really just, again, take advantage of all of the resources we have here in LA County. We're blessed with a very industrious, talented workforce. We're blessed with a lot of corporations and companies that really want to do the right thing. And I think we have the support of our consumers as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I don't want to be sort of doom and gloom, given that we're starting to see an uptick, and it's troubling in terms of what the metrics show us, but I know we're going to get through it. So it is going to be through our collective creativity.
Thank you. Ryan, did you have a few words of introduction?
Yes, thank you, Philip, and good morning, everybody. To go off what Kathy was saying, I mean, it's hard not to be doom and gloom right now, but as I've been in live entertainment for most of my career, I could tell you concerts in the concert industry in general has only gone up since I've been here. More tours, bigger tours, average ticket prices increasing, certainly robust, artists going from a club one year to almost a stadium the next. So the trajectory of these artists have been amazing at the least. But here we are in a year that's not really a downturn. It's been decimated. And, you know, look, we've shut it down. There was no issues with the industry as a whole. It was strong, it was ready to go. But, you know, in public health, the decisions were made and now we're collectively dealing with it. But who would have thought in a year that Summer Olympics would get postponed, Dodgers win a World Series not at Chavez Ravine. Lakers are champions in Orlando. SoFi Stadium, which is probably the biggest development in the history of venues, comes on board to no fans in stands. Chase Center in San Francisco entering their first full operating year with no fans as well. And certainly Banc of California Stadium, which as of last night, LAFC pinged another playoff spot, and we were supposed to have over 20 nights of concerts this year, which would have made us one of the busiest stadiums in the world. But that's all on hold. And not to say that we've lost in those opportunities. I don't think we have, but we've lost a year. We've lost some time. When we get back to, business or how we round that corner, at this point, more questions than answers. But the good news is everyone has an opinion, which is how this is going to get to the other side, is people working together. And right now it's kind of sit and wait. And, we're days away from election. My take is after that, maybe a lot of this calms down and we start looking at, how we get back to people in rooms together.
Thank you. And Jonathan, what about you?
As my counterparts have so eloquently said, I actually had a very, very good detailed thought process that I was going to tell to everyone, but they've already hit the nail on the head, both of them. I share their sentiments. Entertainment is evergreen. It's not that the industry was having an issue before, it's that we are particularly susceptible to this particular type of emergency. In some ways, when you actually look at the level of damage inflicted to the industry, it is a testament to how mature and how good the industry actually is. The problem that we're now faced with is these entertainment juggernauts, these big, especially in my sector, which is live entertainment, these big companies like the Cirque du Soleils, the Felds of the world, they're so big that they're not agile enough to quickly roll with the punches. And the only thing they can do to save themselves is just shut. And so when we look at the industry as a whole, there is going to be a tidal wave of pent-up demand, 100%. No matter how you cut it, people are going to want to get back out there. And so for people like Ryan and Kathy and myself and our businesses, it's incumbent upon us to not only survive through this, but to make sure that we are agile enough to meet that demand when it comes back and when we're allowed to do it. So everything that they said, plus that little nugget from me, I think that really encapsulates where we are right now.
That's great. And thank you again to the three of you for being here to have this conversation with us. I know it's an issue on a lot of people in Los Angeles' minds. To speaking to that issue of agility specifically, there are some entertainment forms that have translated better than others. And John, some things like drive-ins have made a comeback in an effort to maintain social distancing and still provide people with a source of entertainment. So what do you anticipate for those kinds of nostalgic activities post-COVID? Have we entered into a period where we're seeing new directions and new opportunities for how movie screenings and concerts might happen?
It's the perennial question that we even ask ourselves on this side. So Kilburn did pivot our operations towards focusing on creating drive-in venues where we can show virtual concerts, catalog titles, things of that nature. And yes, this summer was very good for that. And I think there will continue to be opportunities for these nostalgic drive-in type areas. I don't think that there is a ton of opportunity beyond the COVID world. I think that once the world has a vaccine, once the world has adopted or adapted to the new normal, we're going to see what we saw before. Drive-ins are great, but they're not particularly profitable. And I'm sure that as Ryan knows from the concert industry, he's got this beautiful venue that has all these amenities. It's got the lights, it's got the sound, it's got the truss, it's got the workers. For a drive-in to try and compete with that on a temporary basis, it doesn't make a lot of financial sense. Now, the flip side to that is it definitely is going to continue to have life so long as we live with this virus. So long as there is a need for socially distant venues that can keep people safe, 100%, there will be a need for these type of venues to exist. There is also on the content side of things, the venue is only as good as the content it can show. And as we know, studios are not releasing first run titles right now. So from a movie perspective, there's really nothing that we can offer that people haven't seen that's new and different. From a concert perspective and virtual concerts, some of the biggest successes have been those virtual concerts. And again, so long as there, as Ryan said, there is a huge demand for that type of entertainment. And so long as we live with COVID, really the only way to fulfill that demand, other than being in your home on the couch, is to go to a venue that's socially distant like this. So I think we've got life for maybe 6 months to a year for drive-ins. After that, once people have figured out how to work through all of the COVID issues, you're going to see them start to wind down for sure.
I guess there's only so many times you want to see Goonies or Grease.
Correct. I love Goonies, but you can only see it so many times.
Exactly, exactly. So, Kathy, looking at you, theme parks are open in places all over the world, but not yet here in California. That's presented a lot of challenges that might not go away, even once a place like, say, Universal Studios is allowed to open. So how do you see the trends that we're undergoing now impacting the way parks operate moving forward?
It's a great question. I can tell you what we've seen in other jurisdictions. So Universal Studios and the Universal Studios portfolio that is closed. So we've opened in Japan, we've opened in Singapore and in Orlando. And what we've seen primarily, well, number one, the biggest finding is that working with local health officials, we haven't seen any large clusters of infections and COVID cases as a result of the parks opening. And so that's a big sort of I think it shows that it's a testament to the public health protocols that we developed and have rolled out and enforced within the theme park. It's going to look different when we do ultimately open in California, and we have the benefit of all those lessons learned. There's going to be temperature checks. We enforce masks. Florida, as you know, does not have a statewide mask mandate. They've actually rolled back all of the restrictions on businesses, period, including restaurant capacities. We've continued to enforce those things within our parks. We've continued to limit capacity to make sure that we have enough space to allow for physical distancing. We've changed how we load rides to allow for spaces. We no longer do, for example, like single riders, so that there's enough space between vehicles and households can ride together. We've changed the way that we do dining. We've encouraged more contactless forms of payments. We're looking at virtual queuing. It's going to look different because we have to evolve. And even with that, I think it's important to note, Florida does not have any statewide capacities on theme park attendance. The demand is not there. What we've seen is in most of our parks internationally, not just domestically, is that it's probably about 25 to 35% of what our normal attendance would be at these times of years. I mean, and it's natural, right? With the pandemic, with the virus, we've learned a lot about how the virus functions and is transmitted in the last 7 months, but there's still going to be a time period where we're just not going to have the consumer confidence that we did before. People are not going to be wanting to go into these kinds of venues. But there is some folks do want to take advantage of a day out of the house, are looking for recreational opportunities. But the industry as a whole, and not just parks, but I think tourism collectively, it's going to be, at least a 2 to 3 year recovery period. And for an economy like California, we know the theme parks alone here employ 135,000 employees statewide. I think we've seen our revenues from tourism cut in half from 2019. So that's erasing over 10 years of growth. And those are all like jobs. Those are all people's livelihoods. So it's extremely worrisome for us. We think we know how. We've done it. We've reopened safely in every other jurisdiction. The problem is in California is that we have no clear timeline for opening. And we have no answers for our employees as to when we can possibly bring them back to work. And for folks who are trying to figure out how to budget, how they're going to make rent, how they're going to pay their mortgage, that's very scary. And so we really would like to just continue working with the health officials at the state level, at the county level. As you know, theme parks were put into the 4th tier based on what we heard on Tuesday's announcements with tier assignments. I think we're now at eight cases per 100,000. We're moving further away from moving on to the 2nd tier, not closer as a county, as a region. So I think we really just need to take our lessons learned from these best practices that have been implemented globally and figure out how we can start to reopen safely here in California, because I think prolonged closures are just not sustainable for the economy, for people who rely on our industry for their livelihood, who have given years and decades of service to the industry. And we really just got to get innovative and work together to find a way to safely reopen. And I have to say, it drove me crazy to see so many people flying to Texas to see the Dodgers play games there. And then they're flying back. I think ultimately we need to figure out how to provide safe recreational opportunities for families here close to home in their counties, so they're not flying thousands of miles away to enjoy something that they could have enjoyed in their backyard. I just don't see how that's even driving cross country, right? You're driving, I mean, across state lines to the casinos in Las Vegas, wherever it is. People are looking for certain things to do, for opportunities to take their families even on a short trip. I think we're confident we can offer that safe venue here at home. It really just has to be done in close coordination and in continuing dialogue with public health experts.
I mean, it's interesting that being in tier 4, and I'm not as knowledgeable on this subject as all of you are. How do theme parks compare to other industries that are allowed to open in earlier tiers?
Well, we think we're very similar to, from an operation, which have been allowed to open beginning in the 1st tier. Outdoor operations only in the 1st tier, and then up to 25% of indoor capacity beginning in the 2nd tier. So for example, the San Diego Zoo is open, SeaWorld has opened their zoo aquarium exhibits, and they're doing well. I mean, we're actually, wish them the best and would love to be able to just replicate. The LA Zoo, for example, is open. It's a very similar demographic, very similar sort of audience, right? It's families with their kids coming out for the day. It's similar in terms of how they're moving throughout the venue, going from exhibit to exhibit. So we think that more than anything, I know there's a sort of a perception that we're driving lots of tourists from out of state, and that will be a magnet for folks that normally don't come and visit or mingle here in LA County or in Southern California. We're just not seeing those trends elsewhere. As I said, the demand is significantly down. We don't anticipate tons of international travel for at least another 2 to 3 years. You might get some occasional tourists from out of state, but they're coming here anyway. They come because we have better weather than the rest of the country. They come for all sorts of other things that we offer. Our museums that can open, the beaches, lots of reasons to come to California. So it's, we think we can, again, open safely with it, like our zoo and aquarium friends have. And I think with tier 4, it's just, we don't have any sense of when we'd ever get there. We don't even know when we'll get to the next 2nd tier. And that's not me talking, that's public health. We've asked them specifically if they can give us sort of a modeling of when they think we'd ever get into that 4th tier. And they don't have an answer for that. So it's really, I mean, I think Ryan said, there's a lot of question marks right now. And so I think faced with the prospect of indefinite closures, we've shelved capital investment projects. At our park alone, $500 million worth of capital investments that we've postponed. We had just finished The Secret Life of Pets, our latest attraction, and it didn't even get an opening to the public. We had to close that same week that we were going to do a soft opening. So we're not looking to build any new rides until we can figure out when we can open and start to see people come back to our parks. So it's not only the direct park jobs and employees that we work in our park, it's all the construction jobs that we would also be generating, all the vendors that we would be purchasing from. So I really do think, again, we've seen it work in zoos and aquariums. We've seen the protocols work in our parks around the world and in Florida. So we think we can make them absolutely confident that we can make it work here in LA, and not be sort of a large driver of community spread, but really get some people back to work. Ultimately, if you talk to our park president, she will tell you that's what's keeping her up her neck, is the 8,000 employees that would normally be working in our parks, that we don't have any answers for when they can come back.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that there is an ongoing dialogue with public health so that at least the considerations can be brought forward and discussed. But you know, regardless of the ability to open, there remains the question of who would be coming. And Ryan, I think this is a great place to bring you into the conversation, because in addition to being home of the LA Football Club, Bank of California Stadium is host to concerts and festivals, and each of which may be drawing in a different demographic depending on the event. So what do we think are the kinds of shifts we're likely to see when it comes to the demographics of people who attend live events, be they concerts or sporting events post-COVID? And what are you looking at for the future of venues like yours?
Yeah, no, it is something we talk about often. In beginning of this year, when we knew that there was going to be no live entertainment, the first rush was to reschedule everything that was up and running. So all the concerts immediately got pushed to 2021. And within that, there's a cycle of a refund period. And we found that over 70% of ticket buyers kept their tickets, which is a significant number. And these shows that we had, and industry-wide, particularly too, these numbers resonate as well. It's not just an LA phenomenon, but so 7 out of 10 folks are saying, okay, I'm going to go to this show. It's not going to be this year. I really wanted to see it. You know, we had everything from System of a Down, which is a rather young, raucous crowd, to Earth, Wind, and Fire and Santana, which is probably a little bit older, I'd imagine, with some of those heritage acts. But if 7 out of 10 of them are holding their ticket, you know, they're thinking to themselves, okay, by this time next year, I'm feeling pretty good about going back into the waters and seeing a show. The interesting thing with concert venues is this limited capacity concept. It just doesn't work. Unfortunately, it doesn't work to pay the bills. The margins are so tight that, you know, you do need 20,000 people in a building to make it work for the artist, to make it work for the building, to make it work for the promoter. So the idea of, hey, a drive-in concert, which is great and keeps perhaps an artist engaged with fans, it's just it. It's just to stay engaged. It's not a moneymaker, which, as you can imagine, some of these artists have lots of money, and some of these artists don't have any money because it's in one hand out the other. So they need to work. And that's the other thing too. We'll see probably in Q1 of 2021, new artists who want to go out on the road for next year. And with that, there'll be announcements and there'll be new on sales. And that's really going to be the big indicator of what the public's appetite's like to go out and sit in a crowd of 20,000 people and scream your head off at your favorite artists. My take is it's going to be very robust. Just speaking with managers and promoters and agents, and the artists as well, sometimes, like, everybody wants to work. And if you're a big concert goer, you're going to want to go hang out, especially if you're a younger concert goer, which, you know, like, I'm not going to give any facts or figures of the concert goer, but primarily a little bit younger. They like to drink and they like to hang out. So I think they're going to say COVID with a vaccine or with not. I think I'm going to go out if I'm allowed to do so. But who actually comes to the gates, we don't know. We'll see. The on sales will be very telling. And if Name Your Artist goes up and it's a flop, you'll see a lot more of these reschedules due to unforeseen circumstances, right? But that is something that's going to be interesting to see. But at my level, at the arena stadium level, you know, you are looking at the larger acts that are a little more contemporary. You know, again, if it's Elton John, maybe that's a different story. I don't know what that looks like. But I think in general, there's going to be a big appetite for live entertainment, particularly concerts, once we turn the corner.
Yeah, so a lot, and that might be a push-pull there too, as you create opportunities for people to gather. How does that continue to look in the eyes of the public health officials? So it'll be an ongoing situation for sure, at least until vaccines and other, you know, sophisticated forms of disease management are available. So with that, let's jump in and take some questions from the audience. If you have been listening in and found something that struck you and wanted to pose it to the panelists, now would be a wonderful time to put it into the chat. One of the first questions we have in has to do with the future of streaming services. because a lot of us are watching a lot more of our content via Netflix, Disney Plus, Peacock, all of the different platforms that are available now for our use. And theaters have been a place that have attracted wide audiences. So riffing on that particular theme or topic, I wonder for any of the panelists if you have thoughts there.
Kathy's probably the best to answer this question given the company she's working for, but I certainly, because of the parallel path that we run with the drive-ins and the things that we are doing, I think that streaming definitely hit its stride, and it's in its heyday right now as people are homebound, don't have a lot to do. My worry for streaming services is that there will become a saturation point where people just are sick of sitting on their couch. I don't think we're ever going to run out of stuff to watch on streaming. All the different services are putting out some great content. The content is excellent, but there's only so much that people can take of sitting on their couch. At some point, they're going to want to get out. And like it or not, you cannot replace that theatrical experience, that going to the movie theater, getting your warm popcorn that you pay $20 for, and watching the newest Marvel movie or whatever happens to be in the theater. You can't replace it. It's a way to get out of the house. And I think what we will see is a vastly contracted theatrical industry, with some of the biggest players not being able to necessarily open to the level that they were before, but it will come back because you can't replace it. At least that's my take.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that the pandemic accelerated some of the trends that we had been seeing before. I mean, I think that the streaming services are a byproduct of, honestly, was our answer to piracy. Right? There was a lot of people who were not willing or didn't have the means to go to see a movie in the theater. So they started, stealing the content online through some of these rogue websites. And so collectively as an industry, we came together and had to innovate to meet that demand and provide consumers with a legitimate way of viewing our content. And I think it's been a success story. Pre-COVID in 2019, we saw a ramp up of especially television production. I think at the end of last year, we had something like 500 scripted shows in production globally, which was the most ever. It's the golden age of TV, all driven by the demand to provide content, original content for all of these various streaming services, including Peacock. And Peacock has been steadily growing in subscribers. I do agree with Jonathan, though, there's always going to be a place for exhibition. We're finishing up Jurassic World. We're hoping to release that in theaters. We make certain movies with sort of the movie-going theater experience in mind, with that surround sound, with that feeling that you get from watching it with a crowd. I don't think that you're ever going to effectively replace that, or that's ever going to go away. And we even saw movie theaters invest in the experience too, with reclined seating. They've started to offer like wine and food options that go beyond your traditional popcorn and hot dog meal. So I think that we will see a demand. The same kind of crowd that wants to go see live concerts that Ryan's going to produce will ultimately want to come back to a movie theater to gather for this kind of communal experience. So I think that you'll see both of them do well. I had a lot of families reach out to me, friends saying when we released Trolls, how much they enjoyed having that option, who have very young kids. There's toddlers who just don't do well in the movie theater. They really enjoyed being able to access that, and they watched it at home. And so I think there'll be a space for both post-COVID. And this is one of those things where I do feel it'll be a good innovation. It was accelerated by the pandemic, and it'll just end up with better options for the consumer when we're ultimately out of COVID.
Yeah, another of the things that the streaming boom has created is a real growth in content production, particularly here in Los Angeles. And so as we've looked for what is the effect of the pandemic been on the physical production side of the business, we saw almost no activity during the shutdown because it was completely impossible to film. But then even once filming resumed, it didn't come back in a big way right away. In fact, it hasn't been until this October or we're starting to see some of those scripted series resume production because there's been a lot of moving parts. And television has really been the bread and butter for the physical production industry in Los Angeles. So we're very grateful to see that returning. It's lots of work opportunities for one of the largest employment sectors in the region. But we're not there yet, and we don't expect to achieve a new normal or return to previous production levels until well into 2021. So looking at another of the audience questions here. So we're looking at live sports, right? The Dodgers just had a pretty amazing run that was a cause for celebration for a lot of us. And I want to talk for a minute about bubbles. So that is, efforts to sequester fans and players and the players themselves so that we can have a safe environment and that sporting events can continue. I'm curious about, on the stadium side, if there are any modifications to the venue that are being contemplated so that we can perhaps bring fans into those spaces more soon.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just in general, venues are always looking to, reimagine how you do the fan experience, for how you park your car, to how you find your seat, to how you get your food. But now that's been, sped up, that process. So in terms of Big California Stadium, we partnered with Clear, also doing thermal scans, reimagining how a guest gets their food, where it's ordered from your app, it's already prepackaged, you're ready to go. You're not going to see a condiment bar anytime soon, or the communal soft drink fountain, stuff like that is probably going to go away for a while. But the reality does remain that you're sitting inches away from a stranger next to you, right? And that's not going to change. So we could do all these things, and one-way pathways and cleaning bathrooms better, which need to be done in general. But ultimately, when there's a G8 pit in front of the stage, there's 10,000 people hip to hip. And that's just not going to change. So yeah, we could sit here and say, hey, all the ways we keep people clean and distant from each other, but ultimately that goes out the window once their favorite song comes on. So yeah, the next time you go to your favorite venue, you will see changes, but ultimately you'll probably sink back into your old routine. It's not going to be the venue that's going to say, why didn't you keep it this way? Because people are just creatures of habit, right?
I think so. I think a lot of us will probably return to our previous habits as soon as we feel it is safe and we are able. Another question that came forward in the chat feature had to do with efforts to bring production back. So I could speak to that, but Kathy, maybe it would be more interesting from a studio standpoint. So as we look at productions being done outside of Greater Los Angeles, is there, and that has been a trend in recent years where it's been spread about the globe, do we think that this has any impact on the desirability of Los Angeles as a film location? Would there be a greater shift to establish production centers as a result of this, or will it continue to be a more global and spread out phenomenon?
That's a good question. I think it all depends, to be honest. I think we're continuing to see sort of production commence slowly globally. There's a couple of things come to mind with just filming in California, and specifically, it's taken a while just to kind of get our arms around what the new protocols require, and just the new way of doing things, right? It's not as easy as it was. There's lots of logistics and coordination involved with tons of people, from medical teams to emergency services, just figuring out and making sure we have enough testing capacity. So costs have gone up, understandably. The cost of productions, maybe 20-25% at least above what we were already spending on production. So that's going to, budgets ultimately drive where we produce, right? So I think the California's tax incentive program, we need to look at that if we want to retain a lot of this production, because I think although travel is still to some jurisdictions tricky, and it's, with numbers going up all over the world, travel isn't always desirable. But if we can figure out a way to produce something safely in another jurisdiction at a significantly lower cost, even when you account for the travel, and if we can work with that government, to not only get them to agree or collectively decide on the safety protocols, but also on getting sort of the cast and crew we need, despite some of the travel restrictions there, then it's ultimately going to be the budget that drives where we film. So I think the state definitely needs to take a look at the California Incentive Program and really think of it as a way to, I think, drive a lot of spend in production on the front end, and really use the entertainment industry as a way to revitalize, especially some of these small businesses that have been decimated by these shutdowns. I think all the studies that we've done shown that there's a positive return on investment to the state for the tax incentive programs. So I think I would highly encourage the governor's office and state legislatures to really evaluate what we do with that program and how we're funding it, to make sure with understanding that productions are facing increased costs, what we can do to make sure that they're looking at California and staying here as opposed to leaving to other states. The second thing I would note too is space. Right, we were out of space, almost out of space before the pandemic hit. I think we were at like 98% occupancy for sound stages. Now space is more important than ever, especially if we're looking to avoid impacting neighborhoods. The community understandably might get nervous if they see large, truckloads of people moving into their street to film. We're slowly starting to go out more on location. We believe in our safety protocols, but to the extent we can, it's easier to, be on an enclosed stage space where you can make sure you're controlling the environment. So I think we're also going to be looking at where can we set up? Where is there physical space for that? And California, or LA in particular, really needs more infrastructure if they want to accommodate the growth of the productions, especially as that we're producing more and more for these streaming services. So yeah, it's sort of I hate to say like it depends, but I think that the short answer is we'll continue to make productions with jurisdictions that are doing well in fighting the pandemic, but also providing very competitive incentives, not only for the production costs and expenditures themselves, but also on the infrastructure side that are giving us the infrastructure facilities we need to set up and film safely.
So what would be then, and I'd love to hear this from each of your perspectives, what would be a good thing for the participants who are observing today's panel to do individually or as representatives of their companies, their industries, to help some of this process along?
I'll let Jonathan and Ryan go first since I just finished talking, and then I'll add my 2 cents.
It's tough because I think it depends on who you are, what industry you're in, what company you're in. I mean, as a consumer, the best thing that you can do is wear the mask, please. Don't give grief to the poor employee who is just there trying to work. They have no dog in this fight. They're just trying to work. Don't give them any grief. Don't be a mask hole, as I've heard it being called before. As a business owner or someone who might be in the entertainment industry, I guess, not to harp on it, but survive, become agile, become efficient so that you can meet what will be a demand when we're allowed to. I know that's making it sound super simple. Well, you just survive, it'll be fine. And I know that's hard, but that's really what you've got to do, because there will be a moment when your services are required and you're going to have 6 months of feast. You're in famine right now, but you will have a few months of feast at the end of this. Yeah, and just as much as you can, take care of your employees, take care of the people around you, because, and I'm sure Kathy and Ryan are both dealing with this, it's, Kilburn's a bit smaller than these two organizations, but the startup costs to restart your business are going to be huge if you start losing people because they have to make that difficult choice to go somewhere else, and you've got to retrain and you've got to rehire. Those costs are real. And it's just adding insult to injury. It's adding hardship to an already economically difficult situation. So as much as you can, retain that organizational knowledge, retain those people, even in this, as Ryan said, the question mark of uncertainty, not knowing when you're going to be able to bring them back. Whatever you can do to keep them is going to help you start up quickly on the backside of this.
Yeah, having that wide perspective of, it's really bad right now. However, it was really good 8 months ago. And my gut is it will be really good, hopefully maybe 8 months from now. But, as Jonathan said, that startup process, it's the same thing for us, to go from hosting empty stadium matches to 22,000 fans, or going back to hosting a festival with 200,000 people for a weekend. That takes quite a bit of time to ramp up. So we're already in that phase now of planning. And it's just that, it's planning. You can sit there at a table all day long and with a chalkboard and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. But once you kind of see that light at the end of the tunnel, and we hope it's not a freight train coming at us, but we go, okay, this is happening. We're going to go forward. It's all hands on deck, right? And it's going to be grueling. I can't wait to have grueling work. Don't get me wrong, but that process of getting back up and running is going to be, it's going to be interesting. But again, speaking to the folks in the industry, and a lot of them are sitting at home waiting for that phone to ring. I think everyone's ready for that work, because that's kind of what the entertainment industry is anyways. Like, you work your ass off for any amount of time, and then you sit in your hands for any amount of time. But I think we're all ready to get off our hands and get back to work. Oh, and if you know anybody in the governor's office, maybe you call him and give him your 2 cents, or the county health board. You know someone from there as well. You could give them your 2 cents.
Yeah, and I guess I'll piggyback off of Ryan and plug this website, and I'll put it in the chat too. It's www.reopencaliforniaamusementparks.com. It's a site that's started by the California Attractions and Parks Association, and there's resources there that you can write letters, you can post a testimonial. We're really looking for support from not only the public, our consumers, the people that enjoy coming to our parks, but also, again, the small businesses that really depend on our industry for their survival. So if there's feel free to share that website with your family and friends. I think theme parks in particular are very much part of the Southern California culture. I think we all can remember the first time we went to our first theme park, or when we got on that first crazy ride. So if you're looking for things to do locally, again, we firmly believe as an industry that we can open safely. We would not be pushing for even a modified reopening if we thought it was going to endanger lives. Because first and foremost, we care about the safety of our employees and the guests that we entertain. So we would never open up in a way that we thought would increase infection rates. So we think we can do this safely. We know the how, we just need to know the when. And the tier 4 is just not it's frankly just not that's sort of a roadmap to indefinite closure as opposed to a roadmap for reopening. So I encourage everyone to visit that website. And yeah, contact your local representatives, whoever you know, and show your support for parks.
Thank you. Next question might involve a future business opportunity for 2 of our panelists. So it comes to Ryan from an LAFC season ticket holder who says his last game was on February 27th. He misses the stadium experience. He misses hearing the 3-2-5-2. And he wants to know, how can we replicate some of that experience for the playoffs? How about field-based watch parties? I mean, John, Ryan, you see an opportunity to put something together here and make a thing happen for the fans?
Believe me, we'd love to. I mean, I think as it is now, you're not allowed to have any more than 10 people in any defined space. But yeah, look, we've certainly been in contact with, let's just say, the bigger buildings in town to see if we could have a crowd socially distanced, but it's pretty much a rubber stamp no from the authorities. But it's definitely something that's almost a daily conversation, especially now that we are looking primed to go deep in the playoffs and potentially even an MLS Cup visit. Yeah, we want fans there, believe me. From ownership down to the players, it's not the same without having the fan base in the stadiums. And look around any league, And as much as I love sports, it's hard to watch some of the stuff. It looks like, preseason, or it looks like, it's schoolyard stuff. It's just not the same without the emotion from the fan base. Nobody wants to get it there faster, believe me. Right now, I don't have an answer for it, but it's definitely something that is top of mind of how we get, some type of interaction with our fans back besides, empty seats.
Yeah, and Ryan, you're totally right. You can't replicate that feeling as a player without having those fans in there. And so it is really important that the fans be there. To the question, Phil, that you had said, is there an opportunity for something to happen here? We actually did do that over in Connecticut. We had a location and we partnered with, I believe it was Hartford FC, to do watch parties with them for a bit. Again, it's great, and it gives the fans an opportunity to drive together and be there kind of together. It's just not the same. I'm certainly willing to facilitate that in the various locations that we work on. I know the Dodgers had their playoff watch parties at Dodger Stadium, so they brought in some giant LED screens to do that. So excellent, but again, you can never really replicate. And that's why I think we're going to see people go back in droves when they are allowed to the theme parks, to the stadiums, because you cannot replicate that no matter what you do in a socially distant way.
And so when is that point, if you had to make a guess? What are we talking about? How long do we have to wait?
Well, honestly, I personally feel like there is going to come a point in time where whether or not there's a vaccine, people aren't going to put up with it anymore. They're just not. And they're, as Ryan pointed out, the younger demographic concert goers who are willing to take the chance of, I'm going to go out and risk getting COVID. I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm fit. The chances for me are low. I think that will come in the next 6 to 8 months as we get into summer of next year, a second summer of people not being able to do anything. I don't think they're going to put up with it. And you can make all the rules you want government wise, but people are just going to gather. They're going to do it. And so to Kathy's earlier point, if we can come up with some safe alternatives for people to do that, then it will help everything. It will help everyone be able to be safe. But just saying a blanket no, people aren't going to put up with that for another summer. I don't think.
I think you're seeing it now in the people who are out celebrating in the streets, right? For the Lakers and Dodgers victories, where I believe public health has said that part of the uptick in cases has been associated with some of these celebrations and watch parties. So you're seeing it now, that same demographic of younger folks that are, desperate for socializing and to just experience a little bit of what they used to. So it's just, to Jonathan's point, this is the beginning. I think it'll just increase as we go on.
Yeah, Kathy, I think you hit the nail on the head. People are gathering as we speak now. They are doing it, and they will continue to do it because it's human nature to do it. So this complete prohibition of public gathering, good luck. Do it as long as you can, and hopefully it does save lives, and hopefully this isn't in vain, but it's going to boil over, especially with, the younger kids. I can't imagine. I'm at the point now where I don't have a problem sitting home on a Friday night. It's kind of like, all right, no big deal. But I remember when I was 18, there was no way I was going to do that. I was going to find something to do, pandemic or not, right? So whether, we allow these folks to gather in some manner, or they're going to go across county lines or state lines to make it happen, and they're going to bring it back home. So one way or the other, yeah, there needs to be some type of progression, and not this, we're going to open up in a few months and then pull it all back in again. I think, to me, that's the most frustrating thing. We really need a solid path, and that's not one that's going to get blocked down the road once we're all kind of on board with the plan.
And I also want to just the economic realities too. It's not only that people aren't just as social creatures going to put up with prolonged closures or prohibitions on gatherings, it's the economic impact of that. And I'm just going to share a personal anecdote. My dad has been a banquet server at a local prominent hotel since 1996. There's no banquets right now. There's no special events. He's paying $750 a month out of pocket to maintain his health insurance for him and my mom. We're fortunate enough to be able to pay it to maintain that health coverage, but he has no idea when he's ever going to go back to work. The hotel can't tell him. And it's not even like we have a tier, right? There's no tier where all of a sudden big, huge weddings are okay. So it's this perpetual uncertainty. How do you budget for that as a family? To say I may be having to pay almost $1,000 a month for the next 2 years because I'm never going to be able to work enough hours for the hotel or the union to cover the health coverage. So that's the personal cost. It's not only sort of the social aspect where people are just frustrated and tired of being home. It's the economic fears. And for someone who's close to retirement age, like my dad, it's not a reality to be able to say, I'm going to go get retrained and do something else. I'm going to go into healthcare. I'm going to be able to get a job working remotely online. This is it for him. So if this shutdown had happened when I was a school age, in high school, we would have lost our house. So these fears are real. I mean, this is honestly, again, our management, the theme park wants to reopen first and foremost, not because we're going to start making money, but because we want to get people back to work. And we want to be able to give them some peace of mind and a way to support themselves and their families. So that's why I think it has to be a balance, not just, we want to save lives. We don't want to get people, we don't want people to get sick. I agree. Wear your mask, wash your hands. Don't be commingling with people who aren't in your household. But we just can't ask people who, have been working for decades to just, sit at home until we've figured it out in another year, when they just don't have those personal savings to make it through. And the unemployment, it's not like there's tons of unemployment money coming in. So we're seeing people really at the end of the road here. And I, personally, I'm just worried too about what that does, the stress of the uncertainty to households.
If I can just piggyback on what Kathy had said, she makes an excellent point. There is a knock-on effect to people not working, and it's going to affect every industry, not just ours. It's going to affect retail this holiday season as people don't have those dollars to spend on holiday stuff. And the more that, again, LA is so dependent on entertainment, the more that people are out of work, the less money they have to spend on entertainment. So even though I share Ryan and Kathy's not rosy outlook, but optimistic outlook that we're gonna get back there, there's gonna be some hard times because there will be a lot less discretionary income for people to go to the movies, for people to go to a theme park. And I think all three of us on this panel, and even you, Phil, all agree that if we can come up with a way that the government or governmental organizations, the municipalities agree is a safe way to open, then we should do that as soon as we can to get those dollars flowing through the system again.
So what should the approach be? What approach should the decision makers and public health officials be taking in order to help the entertainment industry reopen that perhaps they're not doing now?
I can't say that they're necessarily not doing it. Look, I do have to say they've been thrust into a situation that, again, the words unprecedented, that always is bandied about as the term. It's an unprecedented times that we find ourselves in. It's true. So they are, they're doing what they can, and they are putting out literal fires as well as, economic, social. They're doing a ton. So I don't want to kick them while they're down. I don't want to say that they're not doing a good job. They just need to look at it, not just from as Kathy pointed out, not just from the health perspective, but from a macro perspective when they do make their public policies. And they need to not get bogged down in the bureaucracy that is so easy to get bogged down in when they're dealing with things that need quick answers, quick, smart answers. So I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not. I am not in public service, and I never could do what they do because they have to serve a lot of masters. I don't have the answer, but I think being willing to be flexible, being willing to understand that, hey, some of the policies that we have in place might not make sense based upon what we're seeing. I understand why we initially had them for these reasons, but we also need to understand why they don't necessarily make sense now. So it's one of those, you got to know the rules before you can actually break the rules. And I think they just need to take a real hard look at some of the policies that are out there. But again, this is by no means me saying that they aren't doing everything that they can. It's tough. They're in a tough situation, and I get it.
Yeah, I agree. This is not an enviable task, right? I mean, it's unprecedented. I don't want to beat up on the public health officials and the people who are trying to steer us through. I do think, though, that they would benefit immensely by relying on the industry experts who operationally know the ins and outs of all of their respective businesses, can tell you exactly how we can modify procedures, protocols, ways that we do things to mitigate a lot of these public health risks, and then let us try it. I think even if it's in a scaled back way, we can slowly ramp up. It's what we've seen, I think, in the experience with public health. They're public health experts. They are not experts on how to produce movies. They're not experts on live events. They're not experts on even theme park operations. We're those experts. So what they can be doing really, I think, is, I don't want to say be deferential, because there does need to be a back and forth, but have the true dialogue. I mean, to Ryan's point, just sort of a rubber stamp no every time we want to do something. That doesn't get us anywhere. That doesn't allow us to be creative and innovative and come up with ways to get people back to work and slowly reopen. We're just going to be stagnating. So I think there really has to be a consideration that if we've been doing this for many, many years, decades, we know a thing or two about how our businesses work. We're the first people they should be consulting and developing protocols and deciding where things can open. And if they're going to disregard sort of the cumulative experience of all of the industry experts, then there needs to be a compelling health reason why. And I think a lot of it just seems, in some ways, it doesn't make sense, where we heard for months and months that everything had to be outdoors. Outdoor venues were safe. If you could get people to primarily congregate outside, that would do a lot to spread the virus. And somehow that doesn't apply to theme parks. That logic disappears when it comes to theme parks, which are primarily outdoor venues. So it's those kind of things where we start to hit a wall. So I said, we don't want to beat up on public health officials. We want to support them. And we want to be able to say, this is what we know, what we've learned from not just decades of operations, but in dealing with numerous different health agencies throughout the world. We feel like we've earned that trust, and we feel like we know how to do this right. We just need that partnership from our government.
Yeah, I think we're at a point now where perhaps the cure is worse than the disease, but we have to learn by doing. And right now we're not. And, we are the operators, we are the professionals in our business. And yes, I'm not an expert on, communicable diseases, but I would say, how we open up safely and how we go about, getting back to normal is very important. The after effect of this disease, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll look back and you'll say, wow, I mean, hopefully it doesn't get to that level, but hopefully we won't be saying things like, oh, wow, look at all those job losses that resulted in bankruptcies, that resulted in suicides, that resulted in depression, that resulted in alcoholism, all this fallout that is going to fall out eventually. Right now we're in the eye of the storm and we're just like, where do we go? We're being flooded around every which way, but we've got to get back to a point where we're just telling people like, hey, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do. And leave it up to the consumer. If you don't want to go to your theme park because you don't feel safe, then you don't go. If you don't want to go to a movie theater because you don't feel safe, you don't go. But if you yearn for that and you need to get out because it's just good for your mental health, then by God, you should have that option right now, not to sit home and go, well, okay, I'm watching Netflix again for the 180th night in a row. That's just not feasible anymore. So I think that dialogue needs to happen, because we've had opportunities with major producers that we brought to the health board and to even the governor's office to say, hey, here's a plan that we have. We want to enact it. And not even a dialogue, which again, I don't blame them. I know they're busy doing a lot of things right now, but there needs to be a dialogue.
It's come up a couple times in the conversation prior to now, but that consumer confidence in return. I'm wondering if you could spend a few minutes talking about what modifications you're specifically making that shore up that confidence, that, you know, this is an opportunity that would be a safe opportunity for you to come out and experience with your family, for example. We haven't talked about kids at all either, and I'm curious to know, not the 18-year-olds who can make calls for themselves, but parents who are bringing families out and have to make decisions for other people, young people. If you could address that a bit. What are you doing to make people sure that it's okay?
So, I mean, I can tell you what we're doing in other jurisdictions. So it is, you know, reduced capacity so that sort of the crowds that you probably have in your mind pre-COVID, sort of 4th of July, busy summer day where you're, you know, just kind of lost in tons of people meandering about. The parks are going to look differently. And so again, just naturally, the demand is not there. We're going to see a lot less people in these venues. They're primarily outside. I think most people don't come to parks to kind of meet other people. Like, it's not like a club or a social where you go as sort of to mix and mingle with people. You usually stick with the people that you arrived with, right? With your family and your friends and your household. So what we've done is, just redesign the queues so that you're not, there's enough adequate space between you and other households, loading the rides so that there's spacing between households, enforcing the mask restrictions, hand sanitizer for everyone before they get on a ride, hand sanitizer when you get out. We've completely changed the way we do retail so that, I don't know if you remember when you get off some of the rides, you may go directly into a store and start shopping. That's not going to be allowed anymore. Most of our dining was already outdoor anyway, but we're changing the way that we're serving food and restricting eating to certain areas so that you can't just be walking throughout the park with your mask off the whole time because you're munching on nachos or a churro. So it's going to look different. It really is. There's enhanced cleaning. The HVAC in all of our rides and our indoor spaces has been upgraded. So there's lots of modifications that personally I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. I hate taking them to the grocery store to, you know, anything like that. I would be okay taking them to a park or a zoo right now. Because we can stay safely away from other families, we can keep our masks off, and I know how much they're cleaning. And I know that they're also, you know, we take our own hand sanitizers on, and we're primarily outside. So there's quite a bit that we've done. We've redesigned operating protocols for all of our attractions. They're all different. Most of them are primarily forward facing. So there's going to be some changes at every individual attraction, even within the park. Has gone into completely revamping the way we do things. And we feel, again, there won't be that same demand organically, but for those individuals who do choose to take advantage of the day and come out, we are very confident that sort of the protocols we've implemented will make them feel safe.
Well, speaking for LAFC home games, I think that will be probably the first event that comes back, most likely with a reduced capacity. You know, we're at a little bit of an advantage because we're an open air stadium. So things like HVAC systems and updating your filters, we really hadn't explored that yet. But yeah, it's going to be reimagined. Ticketmaster, which is our ticketing provider, has come out with this new service to adequately space seats within the venue per guideline. So if we go up on sale with our season opener and we're only allowed to have 20%, 25%, whatever it may be, Ticketmaster will automatically you know, put those sellable tickets into the queue for fans to buy that will be spaced out. From there, yeah, again, you'll see hand sanitizers everywhere. You'll see prepackaged foods. Again, the condiment bar is a thing of the past. And stuff like that. Again, the retail store will be shuttered. You'll have to order in advance and it'll be picked up in a bag. So everything will have, you know, a few more steps to it, but we also believe just, you know, if you download the LAFC app, it should be one-stop shop. It's not going to be a major burden on the consumer, but it will be very different. You know, again, the north end of the stadium where the 3252 sits, which is our supporter section, is not going to be a thing anytime soon, which is, you know, part of the heart and soul of going to an LAFC game is that experience. So it's going to be different, but, you know, again, we need a path back to normalcy, and that is the path. And if it takes us a year to be back there, then so be it. But we need that path. We need to be on it. We need to be forging ahead.
Yeah, as far as Kilburn and our activities go, we're in a very unique situation in that a lot of our location-based entertainment is generally pretty big. It's a grand idea for a touring show, anywhere from 15,000 to 60,000 square feet of touring show. That's not really possible right now. It doesn't make economic sense given the restrictions that are necessary to keep everyone safe, to make sure that people have enough personal space and can experience the various shows themselves safely. That said, we work with such great IPs. One that comes to mind for us is Dr. Seuss. They're actually located down in San Diego. And we have a large Dr. Seuss experience with them that's 15,000 square feet. It's 10 different books. You step into the world of the Lorax or the Grinch or Cat in the Hat, and you really live those books. That's not possible at scale right now, at least not to tour, because it doesn't make financial sense to be able to put one of those up. But what is possible is something that we are doing this holiday season, which, you know, not to do a shameless plug, but I do have a point. We're doing 10 locations of single room events called the Grinch's Grotto. And so that single room is essentially a Santa's grotto, but it's the Grinch, because what better year for the Grinch to be the representative of Christmas than 2020, really? And that does make operational and financial sense, because you're able to limit the fixed production costs required to put something like that up, but also limit the amount of people that are in that environment in any one time. So it gives someone just a little shot in the arm of normalcy, so that they say, hey, you know, yes, I love the Grinch. Yes, it's Christmas. Let's lean into the Christmas season. How can we do it safely? It's all the things that Ryan and Kathy said. It's re-envisioning your queue lines. It's re-envisioning your capacities and whatnot. And again, we're very fortunate to be working with DSE, because they get it. They understand. They're like, look, we understand you're not going to be able to put up the giant, beautiful, lush show. What can we do? Let's get micro instead of macro. And that's essentially what we're doing.
The topic of the holiday themed events is an interesting one, because for a lot of different entertainment venues, there is often an effort to create something that is specifically themed around the holidays, and it becomes an audience draw and an extra source of fun. So, and knowing that those things probably take quite a few months to get into production, although we as consumers just experience them for a single day or a single week, what's the earliest you would contemplate special holiday themed events at your facilities? And Jonathan, for you, I mean, it could be like, when's the earliest you expect to be contracted to help with it?
The grotto, for example, was something that we basically got the go-ahead 2 months ago. So we have been scrambling to do 10 locations in 2 months, including fabrication, design, approvals, venue contracts. So it was fast. It was very, very fast, and not something I'd particularly want to do again, but I'd like at least 6 months before knowing I have to do something. But you know what? The virus waits for no person. You're going to do what you're going to do, and you got to do what you got to do. So 6 months for me, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure you'll see too much of that this year. Like, you know, LA Live and the skate rink with the tree, stuff like that will probably be going away this year. But one unique thing, and yeah, we're in election year, but every major public venue is doing voting centers. Certainly Bank of California Stadium is, SoFi Stadium, Staples Center. So a way to keep fans engaged. And look, pretty cool to go into a voting center and you get a look at the court or the pitch or the field and go, wow, this is an experience. And besides that, we're also doing a number of food drives and community initiatives just to stay engaged. Because that's the main thing right now, is to stay engaged, when especially it's just cell phone overload and internet all day long, like to get out of the house, to go down the stadium and to have some type of positive interaction with a place you have really fond memories of. I think it's really important for those people in that community. So keeping with that for now, but yeah, I don't think you'll see a Christmas tree in our pitch anytime soon this year.
Well, City Walk has been open since June, and we're really happy about that. So you might see some seasonal decor go up on City Walk. And we also are actually hosting a voting center. I believe that started actually on the 24th. So we're going to continue to look for ways again to just engage the folks who sort of miss those magic moments at the park. We'd love to be able to perhaps offer a more expanded outdoor, retail and sort of shopping experience, much like some of the other parks have done in other jurisdictions. I'm just thinking of a few of them, like Knott's Berry Farm is doing like a taste of Halloween. There's a little event or Halloween event at Legoland for the younger kids. And these are things that families can do as an alternative to traditional things like trick-or-treating, right? There's a lot of concern as to trick-or-treating that's gonna somehow lead to an uptake because people are gonna gather or have parties. When they come to these venues that we control, we will give you hand sanitizer, we'll make you wear masks, and we'll keep households separated. So we can control the crowds and give at least families something that they can do outside of the house so they don't feel like they're missing the holidays entirely. But it does take months of planning. I mean, to Ryan's point, I mean, we can probably secure maybe some decorations, but that doesn't take into account the operational stuff, and also bringing the employees back that would need to be retrained and onboarded on all the new safety protocols before we were able to do any kind of expanded operation. All that takes weeks of planning. I mean, to give you, we would start building, normally we'd have Halloween Horror Nights going strong right now. Those things, we would start building those mazes in the summer. And we would employ hundreds of part-time actors to work not only actors, but the people who constructed those sets. Those are all jobs and lost economic activity. And it wouldn't be something that we would have been able to turn around in a couple weeks notice. I mean, this is months and months of planning. So, I mean, to the point of just needing some kind of, there's no sort of on button that we can just press automatically and be ready to go once we get the green light from Public Health. We really do need some kind of advance notice to be able to align everything.
One thing I'm not hearing from any of you, though, is that there's gloom and doom on the horizon. I'm seeing a lot of energy and capacity for innovation. Certainly, there have to be things that you're excited about going forward. That not only would you not have had this opportunity previously, but you really think you can make something of what's coming forward. So, is there a specific development that you're looking forward to in the coming months, other than say a relaxation of rules that allow the traditional businesses to return? But tell me about some of the new things, some of the things that were never even in consideration prior to COVID-19 visiting us.
Well, I can certainly talk about, from my perspective, which is going to be completely different from Ryan and Kathy. Kilburn is not a giant company, but we certainly have a lot going on, and we work with a lot of major IPs. And what has been most interesting to me about this, and it's a double-edged sword, and it's sad, but there's also opportunity here, is, I mentioned the implosion of Cirque du Soleil, the difficulties Feld is having. We're in the wild west of entertainment right now. The opportunities to redefine who the major players are in the industry and to redefine what the customer experience is. Again, I hate this. I hate that we're in this situation, but the fact of the matter is, at the end of this, the playing field is much more level than it was before. And the barriers to entry for first-time producers, first-time live entertainment companies to really get out there and offer something are much lower. Show me a circus that's not owned by Cirque du Soleil, and I can count on one hand the number of circuses, and they're tiny, that are not owned by Cirque du Soleil. They gobbled up every single other company in the industry except for Ringling, which Feld owned and Feld closed. So there is no circus industry without Cirque du Soleil. The difficulties that they are having now, you're going to see a ton of first-time circus producers, a ton of first-time live entertainment producers who are going to seize this opportunity and start putting out some new work, because it's no longer going to be a consolidated industry. So from a perspective of something I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out and seeing who the new players are and how the industry itself reforms itself with these new power centers as we're going forward. That's intriguing to me.
Something I look forward to is obviously just getting back to where we were. I think, with the reschedules of shows that were 2020 and what's kind of been on the books for 2021, if it goes to plan, it could be one of the craziest touring years ever for live entertainment. That's a big if, though. But if it does happen, it could be crazy. But what Jonathan was saying is there's going to be some major changes within the industry. And what I'm seeing currently, and what I think is going to continue, is the smaller venues, your clubs, your theaters that are independently owned and operated. These are the guys who are hanging on, by the skin of their teeth right now. It's not pretty for them. And what I do see is, a buy-up of sorts of these clubs, and similar to what, Clear Channel and Live Nation did 10, 15 years ago. I think you'll see that as well. Something like a House of Blues, where you'd see a new brand emerge, which is helpful because that's where artists get their first break, right? And if these things kind of come under one roof and are managed and streamlined and promote artists in a better fashion, I think it'd be good for the industry. There's going to be some pain and suffering, but I also think that it's going to be a rebirth as well. But you're going to see some major consolidations, and maybe your favorite local, whatever, comedy club, music venue that you like to go see, the up and coming acts might not be around next year, or it could be under a completely different name and operator. But again, I think that does present new opportunities for the industry and certainly for the artists, because that's what the industry we're in. We're here to churn out new entertainment and produce new stuff. So people come back and go, I like that. But yeah, I mean, right now, again, we're such in the middle of it. It's hard to predict what's going to happen, but there's certainly going to be some consolidation, especially with the smaller venues. I mean, look, the Hollywood Bowl is not going anywhere. SoFi Stadium's not going to go anywhere, but your smaller places, I think they're going to get bought up and you're going to see a new operator.
Kathy, before you get in with yours, I noticed something interesting that Ryan said. Ryan's saying on the venue side, he's going to see consolidation. And I'm saying on the producer side, you're going to see the opposite of that. And so that's a crazy, crazy intersect. You're going to have new players on the venue side that are a consolidated powerhouse with a bunch of first-time promoters and producers. What is that going to look like? That is going to be crazy.
I say, I mean, it's hard to think of something that maybe wasn't entirely sort of out of the question pre-COVID. Instead of pointing to things that sort of we were looking at that are going to now be sort of adapted more widely because of COVID, that I think will make for a more seamless experience once we're able to open back up for consumers. Just harnessing technology, like the virtual queues, I think are going to be a game changer in parks moving forward. We were deploying it. We were going to deploy it on Secret Life of Pets and newest attraction for Universal Studios Hollywood, where you can just download the app, select the time you want to come to the ride, and then you can come back at that selected time and walk through the internal story queue and load in. So I think more and more of that, and we obviously would set it up so that you couldn't actually select your reserved time until you're physically in the park. But things like that, as a mom, in addition to, someone who works here, I think it's going to make for a much better in-park experience post-COVID when we're allowed to open up. And it's more harnessing of that. So you could use your phone to order your food, to order merchandise, check wait times on the rides. We were already starting to do that with the Universal Studios app, along with other theme parks. But I think with COVID, it's just really made us look at those with a more fine eye and focus on how we can harness the smartphones to just really help us enforce the safety protocols and, also have the side benefit of making it a better experience overall for everyone.
That brings us to probably our last question of the day. And because as a moderator, I like to be humble and know that I probably didn't have all the questions in mind that our panelists had and didn't think to ask, to predict what they thought. If there was one thing that you would like to leave the audience with today, one final thought about anything that we've discussed today or things that didn't come up in conversation even, what would that final thought be?
You saved the hardest question for last. I think perspective is just key on this. I mean, to take away from industry specific things and just how we experience things as humans. Like, you know, there's some times where I just get so bogged down in like the state of things, you just, you know, you almost want to explode, but you step back, you take a walk, you just think about like, this is one point in time. There's been many bad points in time, and this is certainly probably one of them. Not the worst, but you know, it's going to take time. And I think it's just that perspective that, you know, look, we're all going through it, some worse than others, certainly. And that's what makes you feel like grateful for what you have currently, because it could be a lot worse. But, you know, my personal point of view is one day at a time and look towards the next day, because this has got to get better at one point. And, you know, I haven't seen it yet, but I see that little like beam of light at the other end of the tunnel. And I'm like, okay, I think that's actual light on the other side. So day by day, and that's just more of a philosophy than anything else.
I would say from an industry I have two answers. From an industry perspective, again, I said it earlier, entertainment is evergreen. People are always going to want it. So no matter what, there will be avenues, there will be opportunities for entertainment to flourish, whether it be traditional stuff that we knew pre-COVID to something new that comes out post-COVID. So I share Ryan's not enthusiasm, but his perspective on the light at the end of the tunnel. I do think it exists, and I think that the industry as a whole will come back. It just may take some time. So that's from the entertainment perspective. From the personal and social perspective, just take care of each other. Right? I mean, just as Ryan said, we're lucky. Some of us are luckier than others to be working, to be looking towards the future, to be able to have the time to have this conversation. Some of us are not. So take care of each other. Do what you can. You never know what someone else is going through. That's all I would say to that.
Yeah, I think I'd say from the industry perspective is that sort of maintaining safety and maintaining public health does not have to be mutually exclusive to, preserving, the economy and opening up sectors of the economy. We think that there's a pathway forward to do both. And it's not going to be easy. I don't want to say like it's just going to, we can all just wear masks and it'll be fine. I mean, there has to be an innovation and a change in how we do things. And we have to, I think, collectively be committed to the new way of doing things through the safety protocols in order to make them work. The good news is that we've seen it happen every other jurisdiction. We've seen it happen globally. I think we can do it together. I guess from a personal standpoint too, I just check on your neighbor. Make sure that you're, just sort of almost like reconnecting with your community. Even if you can't do it from a physical standpoint, we can pick up the phone and send a text. I mentioned my dad and his health insurance. I personally spent hours trying to help him navigate health insurance stuff. So just something like that. If there's someone that that needs help trying to navigate whatever it is, it makes a difference when you just give an hour of your time to help someone out. So yeah, just check on each other, check on your neighbors, sort of smile if you can. And it actually does make you feel better, and it makes other people feel better too.
Thank you. Thank you to each of you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this panel. So let's thank our track sponsor, Viacom CBS. and our panel sponsor, FilmLA. Normally we do that with a round of applause. It's hard. Virtually it's difficult, so we'll just give you a great big thank you for spending your morning with us today. Our keynote speaker begins at 11:50 a.m. So between then and now, I encourage you all to spend some time visiting our exhibitors so you can enter the raffle for your chance to win any number of prizes, including round trip tickets for Southwest, a signed jersey from the LA Rams, and lots of gift cards for Valley area businesses. So thank you again for spending your morning with us. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Kathy.
You guys.